Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Clik2Pay is transforming the payment experience for consumers and the online transaction capabilities for online retail. Riding the rails with the great acceleration of e-commerce, this company has created an intuitive, quick, and secure POS system that's both consumer and retailer friendly. By leaning into the Interac e-transfer technology, the system steps away from the cumbersome and expensive card-centric payment processes that currently dominate online sales. Today on The Voice of Retail, I sit down with Clik2Pay founder and CEO Mike Bradley to get a close-up look at their game-changing payment process. Mike offers a walkthrough of Clik2Pay, both from a retailer and consumer standpoint, explaining how the system introduces a level of ease and security to online payments that revolutionizes the online shopping experience.
And I think I'm going to just start by saying it's easier, because it's, but let me unpack that a bit. Mm-hmm. So, we're talking about the online environment for retailers, and many of the things you described, like card security rules, the famous PCI regulations.
Let's listen in now. Mike, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
Very good. Thank you, Michael. How are you?
Well, fantastic. It's great to have you on the podcast. I have to say, you have a great voice for podcasting, so this is going to be an easy listening episode for our listeners.
Dulcet tones, and like I say, a face for radio.
Exactly. You and me both. All right. Well, listen, thanks for joining me. Let's jump right in. Tell me about yourself, your background. It looks like you've got an extensive background in the payment business and the payment fields, and what you do at Clik2Pay.
Sure. Born on the East Coast in Halifax, grew up in Montreal. I've lived in Toronto for the last 30 plus years. I've been in the payments business my whole career, starting with banks, Canadian Bankers Association, and BMO, probably best known in the industry for leading the payments team at Visa Canada for 10 years. Launched a bunch of new products there, Visa Infinite premium cards, Visa Debit, Visa prepaid cards, and even the very early days of mobile payments. So always had a real passion for, improving the way that Canadians pay and the way that Canadian retailers are paid. So that was kind of my corporate career. For the last 8+ years, I've been on my own and developing Clik2Pay. So founded the company a couple of years back and working with other senior leaders from across the industry to do just that, is continue to improve payments in Canada.
Now, how did you get, you've had a whole career in payments, but take me back to the first click, so to speak. Were you always interested in payments, or was it an opportunity that came up and then you fell in love with it? Just, how does someone wind up their entire career in payments? I guess I was saying, where did it all, or how did it all start?
No, that's an interesting question, and one I don't really reflect back on much myself. But I'll tell you at least some of the reasons why I love payments. It's the thing that everyone does every single day, many times a day, and people don't generally think about it too much. So it's kind of like background noise. I like to say people don't stay up late at night trying to figure out how they're going to pay at the grocery store the next day, or people don't go to the grocery store to pay. They go to the grocery store to get groceries. And yet it is such a fundamental part of the Canadian economy. I guess I'm an economist by training, and anything that we can do to continue to improve the efficiency and the cost profile and just the customer experience of payments is something that I've always just had a love for.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's talk about Clik2Pay, the origin story, rationale for the business, what problem you were trying to solve. Obviously, you've spent a career in payments, so something came to you as in, boy, I think there's an opportunity to reduce friction or improve an experience, both, as you say, both for retailers and for consumers, the scope of the scale of business. So give me the whole outline of what is Clik2Pay, and let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. As I described in my background, I've had a career in payments mainly focused on payment cards. And that is the reality of how the payments industry is structured, is that consumer payments for anything from the, electronics retailer where you go and you buy a new PlayStation game to ordering something from Amazon online is very, very card-centric. And that world is about to change. There is this new category of payments emerging in Canada and in other countries around the world, bank account payments, where consumers can pay directly from their deposit account. Now, we've had a system in Canada that does bank account payments for many years. It's Interac e-transfer, and every Canadian, I shouldn't say every Canadian, just about every Canadian knows how the service works, and their bank supports it and are very comfortable with the service.
Yep.
What we're doing is taking the Interac e-transfer service with its real-time payments and putting a very customer-friendly and merchant-friendly or retailer-friendly front end on it. So, you think, and unfortunately, we like to say a demo is the best way to look at what we do. But maybe if I was explaining it, we call it Clik2Pay because you click at, say, an e-commerce checkout. There's 2 quick steps. You go immediately to the Interac gateway page where you choose your bank. And then the second step is you log into your bank once you've chosen it. And then you pay from inside your bank. So it's as simple as that from a customer experience standpoint. Click once, a couple of choices, choose your bank and log in, and then pay securely from your own banking experience. So, it is a really smooth and frictionless experience for retailers. It's fast and easy. They don't need to worry about losing sales and conversion, which a lot of alternative payments can lead because everyone's already so familiar with the Interac process. And of course, it comes with things like, much lower cost than card payments do today. So that was really kind of the genesis of it.
Yeah, it's pretty. And so what was it, 8 years you said you've been working in and around this idea to kind of bring it to life and bring it to market, yeah?
Yeah, 8 years plus since leaving Visa. But no, the idea itself, really for the past 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
But it takes a long time, to build a technology platform. And, the people, myself and the people that I'm working with, we've been around the industry for a long time. This is not like, nothing disparaging about being a 25-year-old working in your basement, but it's not that kind of fintech, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
So building a proper platform that's going to have the scalability and reliability and security that Canadian retailers and consumers demand takes some time. So that's really what the few years is.
Well, let's continue to unpack the consumer piece, because I think for our audience, my audience, which is retailers, they want to understand the benefits and the ease of use for consumers. So as you said, it's a pretty familiar process. There's many instances where you're taken to your bank, you log in and you pay directly. Now, is all major banks, what about credit unions? Is it a fulsome assortment or selection? How does that work?
Yeah, great question, Michael. So maybe taking a step back, you think about the Interac debit experience in store. It's a very efficient and operationally smooth process for consumers and retailers, right? Every bank in Canada issues a debit card that works through the Interac network, and that brand means a lot to consumers in terms of ubiquity and ease
Trust,
of use.
all those things.
Yeah, trust, all those things. Now, in store, that works great. Online, debit is a bit of a hodgepodge, to be quite honest. So we've got Interac Online's product, which is supported by one major bank and a bunch of credit unions, to your point. The Visa and MasterCard debit offerings are also supported by some banks, but not all. And even things like Apple Pay and Google Pay, if you look at the debit options, they're supported by less than half of the cards in this country that people would expect to be able to access a checking account. So it really is a mishmash of bank acceptance for bank payments online.
So I'd almost describe it like a hit and miss for the consumer, right? I mean, that's a bit of the challenge, right? Maybe your bank's connected, maybe they're not. Like I bank with a small credit union here in Ontario.
It is very hit and miss, and online especially, it's much messier. And the beautiful thing about Clik2Pay and e-transfer is that every major financial institution in the country is a part of the e-transfer network. The consumer expectation, what you say, hit and miss in the current world, becomes much less so when you know that at least 90% of customers are going to be able to use the service effectively just by clicking the Clik2Pay button and going through that same set of steps that we just described. And the banking experience is different for everybody. You're at the credit union where you bank. I'm at a different financial institution, but we're both equally familiar with our own financial institution's process. So, once I do the click and go through the 2 steps, then, I'm on familiar ground because I'm inside my bank. The experience we've had is it's generally about 8 to 20 seconds to complete a transaction. And that just makes it super easy to do when you're sitting in front of your desktop computer, or if you're on a mobile phone, to just complete a transaction as a customer.
All right. Well, let's look at the other side of the coin, the important side. What's in it for the retailer? Of course, any retailer would look at the payments part, measure twice, cut once. Is more like measure 5 times, cut once before you touch anything that has to do with payments in your site. They're pretty mission critical. So let's unpack that, because there's a bunch of things that come along with traditional payments. There's fees, there's chargebacks, there's card not present rules, there's your fees change based on which card your consumer is using. So there's a whole suite of things that come with that. How does your value proposition compare to that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I think I'm going to just start by saying it's easier, because it's. But let me unpack that a bit. So, we're talking about the online environment for retailers, and many of the things you described, like card security rules, the famous PCI regulations, chargebacks. If a customer isn't satisfied with the quality of goods or services that they have the recourse offered via the bank, those just don't apply to bank account based payments. If you think about the process I described earlier, all of the decision making for completing the payment belongs with the consumer and the bank or financial institution already. So, if I'm in a retailer site and I click the Clik2Pay button and I get routed over to my bank, I log in using the bank's security mechanisms, not Clik2Pay's security mechanism. Right. And I look at the purchase in my online banking and then say, is this a purchase that I want to make? Those payments are now final, just like when you send me an e-transfer. Let's say miraculously I won the hockey pool that we're both in. You don't expect to be able to get that back. If things don't go your way. Yeah. So it leaves the disputes where they belong, which is between the consumer and the merchant. All of those features just become much more straightforward with Clik2Pay. Now, that trades off against, as you say, this is new, right? And even though e-transfer is used by more than 15 million Canadians a month, they haven't used it in this way before. So there is, of course, a bit of a learning curve and people understanding who Clik2Pay is and all of that. But that will happen over time. Merchants will be attracted to it for its simplicity. And we haven't really spent much time on this yet, but it's not a small point that it's about half the cost of credit cards, right?
Well, it's going to be, indeed, it was going to be my next question. I've got the experience of running and launching a credit card business. I owned the book of business. And one of the reasons we had an in-house credit card was as a credit shield. In other words, the business paid for itself by not, having that transaction done on an MC or an Amex or a Visa card. So we called it the credit shield. You might be, I'm sure you're familiar with that term. There's 2 issues. One is there's credit card fees, which probably are high, as Retail Council of Canada often says, are some of the highest in the world. And they're variable, right? You don't always know the fee you're going to get charged depending on the card. So tell me about how fees work with your product.
Let's start with kind of the current card-based model, because people are very aware of credit card fees. As the pandemic has driven so much business from in-store to online, it's really changed the equation for retailers. So if you take a basket of goods, and I keep saying grocery, but let's use a different example. Online ordering for
camping gear, electronics, anything.
Gear. Right? That sounds great. Let's do camping. Canadian Tire, massive retailer in this country. Yeah. If I go in store, it's nearly half their payments that would be debit, and I don't know much about Canadian Tire's individual pricing for debit, but I would almost guarantee that it's under a nickel to make a purchase. But, if I order that same set of camping gear, a couple $100 online, then I'm going to be paying, more likely, I'm going to be paying credit card than debit, because consumers are just oriented to paying credit cards online. And that $200 ticket goes from being 5 cents to being not a couple bucks, $3 or $4.
Yeah.
So I like to say it could be 100 times more expensive to take a payment online for retailers post-pandemic. And the same applies to curbside pickup. Use the expression card not present earlier. And a lot of curbside pickup transactions are completed with either a credit card or a Visa or MasterCard debit card that are provided in advance and that are also extremely expensive. So for both of those use cases, we can start to make the cost. It's never going to be quite the same low price that Interac debit is in store. But like I said, we can cut credit card costs in half for most major retailers.
And let's talk about cybercrime, the bad guys. Now, on the consumer side, consumers are protected more or less when they use their credit card product in terms of someone using their credit card product. And unfortunately, the retailers, either because they have to put in tremendous amounts of efforts and structures and processes, or they get tagged themselves. How to speak to that for a bit? So intuitively, I think, well, you've already got the money, right? The money comes to the retailer right away. So just talk about that specific process and how is it better than on credit cards for the retailer, or expand on that for me?
The place to start is the point I made a couple minutes ago, which is all of these transactions are approved by the consumer under the security that their bank has set.
The money's there.
Approving online payments.
Right. So the money's there, right? So it's a binary thing. Either the money's in their account or not in their account for the transaction.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. If you're choosing our payment method, you've got to be able to fund the balance out of one of your accounts. I mean, one of the interesting things is because of the way we've set it up, you can choose, your bank. So if your balance at your bank isn't high enough and you've got an account at another bank, that you get the flexibility to be able to select the bank. And then even within that bank, you can choose whichever account the bank makes enabled. Lots of flexibility. But once the transaction has been approved by the consumer within the bank's authenticated experience, and Michael, I'm sure you've kind of lived through the experience when you try using online banking at a different computer or on a different phone. It does things like check a second factor authentication by texting you a code, or it might ask you a shared secret you have between yourself and your bank. Mother's maiden name is the classic one. No one would recommend that today with social media being easy to foil those things.
The bad guys crawl the obituaries. I was talking to an enforcement officer. He said that's the thing, right? I mean, anyway, that's another topic about don't put your entire family tree in your
bad idea.
Obituary.
Bad idea. Even things like your first pet is something that gets easier to troll, and boy, security is a critical part of how people make payments through their bank today. And that quite honestly is we think the simplicity of it, which is consumers already rely on their bank to keep them secure. And the banks generally are constantly improving those security measures. So we're talking about a system, Interac e-Transfer, that's going to do 1 billion transactions this year. I mean, it is not just mainstream, it's mass market mainstream.
It's beyond whatever is beyond, as you said, whatever is beyond mainstream. So and when does that the transfer happen, the settlement happen between the bank and the retailer then in that process?
Yeah, so great question. So we call it real-time guaranteed payments, Michael. So the retailer gets a notification back at the end of the transaction, digital notification, of course, just like you would for an authorization response from a credit card, that says this customer's payment is on the way. Like credit cards, we settle out to any commercial bank account of our customer, so the retailer's bank account, and that can take an extra day. So today we're settling next day, next evening. Anything that happens today, let's say, will be in the retailer's account by tomorrow. But the most important point is they get the notification, in the instant, in the moment, that the
release the order. The order is good, and
that's right. Release the order, exactly.
But the money is even though settlement happens the next day, and I guess I'm used to the words like open to buy is held, but basically that money is now gone from the consumer's account. It is sitting somewhere in between, but next day it comes to the retailer. There's no pulling that back. Again, I'm picking on this a lot because I just want to be clear.
huge.
Not
Yeah,
all
it's huge.
retail. A lot of retailers don't have payment specialists, right? Like the big guys, of course, do.
100%.
A lot of them
100%.
just, really, and it can be so complicated. I was talking to a small retailer, and their head spins sometime when you talk about this stuff. So again, the money is out from the consumer's account. It's basically sitting in the middle somewhere. The consumer can't phone the bank and go, "I'm pulling that back," to game the system. Product shipped, but I'm pulling the payment back. So it's all the settlement happens the next day. So once again, the merchant gets the okay, the thumbs up, clear the order. This is a good order right away. Settlement happens next day, which is not an issue or whatever. And easy as that. Is that what am I characterizing that right?
That is it, Michael. I mean, that is it. Now we will, make sure that nothing nefarious is happening within the system, right? So we onboard all of our merchants, do the kinds of checks that anyone would expect out of a service like this, AML, KYC, kind of credit worthiness for the merchant. And we have committed, because we are working within a financial ecosystem. If a customer says, I've been defrauded, and there's an option to, make it right, let's say, we're going to work with merchants on that. But the rules of the game are very clear, which is that, once a payment is completed in Interac, that it is completed. So
and it's a big deal for you guys to make sure that the prospective merchants who are looking at this know that you stand behind the product and that you actually vet the other, the fellow retailers, that a bad retailer doesn't find their way in there, or a fraudulent retailer just to set up and do this, because that impacts your entire brand, right? And then the trust in your brand. So you guys must spend a lot of time on vetting, making sure they're, legitimate, valid retailers and online retailers, right?
That is exactly right, Michael. The last thing we need is a bad actor coming in. That anytime you're making change in something, as you described it, so mission critical, you got to approach it very carefully. Like you say, I think you said it's not measure twice, cut once. It's measure 5 times, cut once.
That's right.
And so we've done that measurement. It's a big change. We think it's a change very much for the positive. Retailers, like you say, the Retail Council long had a gripe about card fees,
as you would know well. As you would know well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, Deanne Brisebois and I spent much time talking about it in my previous career. But the real benefit to retailers comes from competition in the marketplace and having alternatives. And the world is changing from a world where changes to point of sale systems were complex, expensive, and generally the retailers relied on their bank or the acquirers, the processors. I'm sure you know that group of folks to be able to manage those changes for them. But with online payments, it's much easier to add new options. And at the end of the day, what the retailer needs to know is, like you say, can I release the goods? Is the customer good for it? So adding a Clik2Pay
and that's huge. I mean, I don't want to underestimate that. That's huge. I've been at retailers where, particularly things like, gift orders, right? It's like, we're going to hold it for 48 hours because we want to get a body on a phone. We're not going to release this because, gift cards, particularly once they're gone, right? So there was a delay, and then, people would go like, well, I don't want it then, so anything that impact conversion one way, shape, or another is something to be avoided. Let's spend the last couple of minutes on consumers for a bit and consumer adoption. So I've been hearing more and more that younger consumers are shying away from credit cards. They're looking at these kind of, if I may call them, alternative payments, because now they have more options online. Before, years ago, if you wanted to shop online, you needed a credit card. More and more, that's not the case. Are you finding and hearing, and you must be talking to, at the consumer side, their kind of adoption? What do you expect to see over the next period in terms of this, if I can call it the alternative payment process for online retailers?
Well, I think you nailed it, Michael. There's two groups. I'm going to take a step back and say there's two groups. There's kind of those that traditionally pay with debit card, and we know that debit card skews just demographically. Not judging here. It's a mass market product, but skews a bit more female, skews a bit more suburban and rural than downtown, and it skews a bit like kind of middle income as opposed to upper income, and so those folks have not always had a clear way to access payments from their bank account online. Like we described it before, kind of a mishmash of debit solutions, or
even if they've got,
I think, as you said.
Oh, even if they've got the term, I love this term, bruised credit. Like not everybody, whether you're, I remember when I was, the traditional department store credit card was given to those either with bruised credit because it's a closed loop system, or, young students who are getting first credit. And it's, it's just harder and harder to get that. So it's almost like, well, I don't need that anymore as much as I used to, right? It's so interesting.
Well, and another big segment is new to Canada, right? Folks who have been here, or thin file, we used to call it at Visa, those that have just not enough data on them to be able to support payments from a credit card with a decent size limit.
Yeah. Could have $100,000 in their bank, but they can't get a $500 credit limit, right?
Yeah, that's another topic for another day. But yes, exactly, and that's a surprisingly large number of Canadians. So 43% of Canadians either prefer to pay from their checking account or only pay from their checking account. So, like 4 in 10, more than 4 in 10. Of a retailer's customers have already said, this is how I want to pay. So the ability to be able to stand up a solution that works for them that's lower cost, that is, final payments, and that doesn't have the difficulties of PCI compliance around it, we think on its own is attractive to retailers. I think you brought up a really interesting point and compelling point, which is the changes that are taking place in what people's habits are. I've got 2 teenagers, 14 and 16, and apart from the older one trying to convince me to invest in crypto, which is a whole other, that's a separate podcast again. They grew up in a world where PayPal was the norm, and where they're seeing brands like PayBright or Affirm at the checkout alongside PayPal, or WeChat Pay and Alipay, the two Chinese brands that are quite popular now. So the number of payment options, just like they live in a world where Wealthsimple or Koho are valid alternatives to traditional investing or traditional banking. And we hope to take that space in the alternative payments space. With the credibility that we have together with the improvements in process and retailers. So, I think we think the future looks bright.
All right. Well, it's a great value proposition. So where can the listeners, retailers go to learn more and get in touch and take that next step of exploring how to put you into their transaction, take advantage of all the benefits you've been talking about?
Yeah, well, the hardest part is learning how to spell Clik. So I'll just kind of read out the website name, CLIK, just skip the second C, number 2, PAY.com. So CLIK2PAY.com. And, you just drop us a note there, and we'd love to talk to any retailer looking to adopt a payment method that their customers are going to like and saves time and hassle. So, and cost.
All right, I'll put that link in the show notes as well. And are you a LinkedIn guy? Are you reachable on LinkedIn?
Yeah. Clik2Pay is at LinkedIn. My name is Mike Bradley, and hey, feel free to drop me an email, Mike@Clik2Pay.com. One of the things about being a small business is I'm, not just the owner, but the dishwasher too.
Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, and a great interviewer too. So thank you for joining me on the Voice of Retail. It's a great discussion. I actually like talking about payments because I've got a bit of experience to it, but it's like an onion. Every time you pull a layer back, it gets more interesting and sometimes more complicated. So thanks for unpacking it. It was a nice.
I appreciate it. It's kept me busy for 30 years. That's for sure.
Well, congratulations on your success. I wish you much continued success. And once again, thanks for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of LeBlanc Company Inc. And if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week.